you guys may not know this about me, but one of the reasons why I have this podcast, I had an interest in science for much of my adult life, but I had a period of time when I started just obsessively watching the Animal Planet and watching tons of documentaries and David Attenborough and that sort of stuff. And it just got me thinking so much about life and exploring science even more than I already was, and obsessing over all of these different ideas. And so it's pretty cool that I'm actually getting to talk to someone that was on an Animal Planet show, co-host of the show Little Giants, which I just started watching, and I recommend you guys check it out as well. And maybe one of the cooler titles, we've had a lot of people on this show. You're Billy, you're 300 some. We're nearing 400 episodes here, and you're the first AstrobioFuturist on the show. Billy Almon is joining me today. Billy, how you doing?
Good, Shane. What's going on?
Oh, not much, man. I'm very excited to talk to you because I'd love for you to tell people a little bit about your background anyway. You were recommended to me by I think a couple different past guests, and then I started following you on Instagram, got into your stuff. I love what you're doing, and I want to know what is AstrobioFuturist, and if that requires maybe setting up a little bit of how you got into it and your background first, that would be great.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. So, as an AstrobioFuturist, I essentially look at how can we reimagine different portions or different elements of the human condition, of human experiences. How can we reimagine them for people who will ultimately be traveling to the moon, to the Mars, eventually further out into the galaxy. And also, how can we use what we develop and create in order to do that for people amongst the stars? How can we use and leverage a lot of that technology, creativity, and thinking to reimagine a lot of human experiences here on good old planet Earth? And a lot of that work for me is rooted in my background as an experienced designer and storyteller, creating immersive experiences for companies that create places of magic and happiness, and also my background as a practitioner of biomimicry, which is this approach to innovation where you're studying organisms in nature in order to mimic and imitate their sustainable natural strategies of problem solving. So it's combining those two things to not only look at how can we reimagine certain experiences for people in space, but also how can we improve just the human condition here on Earth?
Oh man, what do I want to talk about first? I started looking at your work and I was kind of shocked and disappointed with myself that we've never had an episode talking about biomimicry before. Man. It's just one of the coolest subjects. Much of this show, we talk quite a bit about like evolutionary biology and psychology, a lot of human mind stuff, but also how it relates to and what we can learn from, evolutionary processes and wildlife, and do a fair amount of, not enough episodes about wildlife, but a fair amount. And I was like, how in the world have I missed biomimicry? What a blind spot. So could you tell people a little bit about what biomimicry is? And by the way, am I at least able to say, when you're talking about designing experiences and stuff, you're talking about things like amusement parks and stuff like that, sometimes integrating some of your work into improving entertainment experiences like that by using things from within nature.
Yes, exactly. Right? Okay, so first of all, I am so honored to be the disciple that brings forth the good news of biomimicry to you and your audience. So thank you. Thank you for that.
It's so important. It's so important.
So when I'm referring to my background as an experienced designer, it is, spent over a decade working for a certain company that has, theme parks and cruise ships and hotels and resorts in places
Very
like
cool.
California and Florida. So I use that experience of, how do you craft a place, a moment in time that will imprint memories on you and your family, and leave you feeling better than you came in. So I use that lens of storytelling and creativity in the work that I do as an astrobiofuturist. As it pertains to biomimicry is this great, amazing process and approach to problem solving where and it's something that has been done and practiced by humans since time immemorial, really, where we are looking at nature, we're studying how different organisms go about solving problems for life at their scale, and then we essentially isolate or identify the strategy that they're using, and we replicate it to address problems at the human scale. So one of the examples that I always use when referring to biomimicry is the example of Velcro. The Swiss inventor who came up with the idea for Velcro, he would always take his dogs for walks through the forest, and he would come home and he'd realize that there's these little spherical burr seeds that were always caught in his dog's fur every time that they came back from these forest walks. I
grew up all around them.
Okay, so perfect. So you might already know the story. So one day he took one of those burr seeds under a microscope, and he noticed that there were all of these little curly Q little hooks that were coming off of the main seed of the sphere. And he realized, like, this is actually a really cool and dope way to attach things to each other. And that was the biological function of that little curly Q little hook. It was to attach to animals that would be traveling through the forest, so that the seeds would latch onto the fur and then be carried off to other places where they could essentially propagate and grow into other plants and trees and so forth. So he came back with he took that idea, and from that he created what we all use as Velcro, this method of attaching things to each other in a simple way.
Yeah.
So that's an example of what biomimicry is, and it can be applied and has been applied to so many different ways. And there's a lot of really cool examples of how biomimicry has already impacted or informed space exploration, and how a lot of people are turning to nature for thinking of how we will explore other planets.
It just makes me upset that we don't wear Velcro as adults, like as I think about it. And by the way, you can tell that the burrs came from that, because if you live around, I remember as a child they would always attach right to the Velcro, and which would kind of render the Velcro useless, ironically enough, if you get enough of those sandburrs on there. But what are we doing with laces, Billy? What in the, like, oh, I'm an adult. Look what I can do. I can tie knots. It's like a tie. It's like, oh, cool. You can do a double winch, but why would you? Why are we putting this thing around? It's so overrated. We got to bring Velcro back.
Most of my shoes at this point, even as an adult, I don't think I have a lot of shoes with laces. Actually, I prefer like straps and Velcro. Like, it's just easier. Like, how much time I got to bend over, now my back is all hurting and I'm sore back because I had to tie my shoe. Like, that doesn't seem right.
My shoes are always untied too, and then people make fun of me for them being like, I gotta stop playing whatever sport to tie my shoes, and people are like, double knotted, and it's a whole
nothing
mess.
About the pursuit of happiness aligns with tying your shoes. It's just not part of the Constitution.